Douluo, Martial Soul Asura Sword, Supreme Killing God Chapter 131, Sea God Island high above the waters outside Sea God Island. Two streaks of light flashed across the horizon, moving with incredible speed, and in the blink of an eye they landed on the golden beach. It was none other than Sumo and Bo Saixi. The afterglow of the setting sun covered the entire beach, stretching their figures into long, slender shadows. Behind them, the ocean waves crashed against the coastal reefs, making a splashing sound. A warm sea breeze carrying the salty, damp scent of the ocean blew against their faces. "This is Sea God Island," Bo Saixi said softly. It truly is a beautiful place." Sumo looked around at the scene before him, his tone filled with a touch of admiration. Before them lay lush greenery, with exotic flowers and rare grasses growing everywhere. The air filled with the faint, fresh scent of plants and the fragrance of flowers. From time to time, flocks of seabirds would sweep across the sky, leaving behind crisp, melodious cries that added a touch of lively vitality to the beautiful island scenery. Gazing at the picturesque view before him, the fatigue from 2 months of traveling instantly dissipated, and his mood couldn't help but relax. Just then, the surface of the sea behind him suddenly surged with a violent splash. Immediately following, a massive white figure shot out of the sea like an arrow released from a bow, kicking up waves several zhang high. Amidst the splashing water, the massive body rapidly shrank, transforming into a woman dressed in tight-fitting attire. It was Xiao Bai of the Devil Spirit Great White Shark clan. After landing, Xiao Bai bowed to Bo Saixi and said, "Greetings, High Priestess." Finally, she bowed slightly to Sumo as well, her tone filled with a touch of gratitude and respect. "Xiao Bai greets you, Your Excellency." Although she and Sumo had not known each other for long, Sumo was not only powerful, but he had also allowed her clan to feast on the corpse of the deep-sea demon whale king, significantly boosting the overall strength of her clan. She had kept this debt of gratitude firmly in her heart. More importantly, even the high priestess, who held an extremely high status, treated Sumo with great respect, so Xiao Bai naturally dared not be negligent. Watching her reserved demeanor, Sumo smiled faintly and said, "My name is Sumo. In the future you can just call me by my name, there is no need for such formalities." Hearing this, a look of hesitation appeared on Xiao Bai's face. "Your Excellency, how could I dare to address you by your name? That would be far too disrespectful." At this moment, Bo Saixi spoke up. "Xiao Bai, just do as Sumo says." After spending this time together, she had gained a general understanding of Sumo's character. With Bo Saixi's words, the concerns in Xiao Bai's heart dissipated a little, and she quickly nodded in agreement. "All right," Bo Saixi then instructed. "Xiao Bai, you should head back first." Xiao Bai replied respectfully, then turned and leaped into the deep sea behind her. The moment she hit the water, her form transformed back into the massive devil spirit great white shark. With a flick of her giant tail fin, she stirred up a spray of waves and disappeared into the churning seawater. Not long after Xiao Bai left, several figures darted out from the dense forest ahead. They were all dressed in yellow attire, and when their gazes landed on Bo Saixi, they were filled with awe. "Greetings, High Priestess," the group said in unison. On Sea God Island, the status of spirit masters was determined by the color of their clothing, and the definition of these clothing colors corresponded exactly to the colors of their spirit rings. Therefore, their status was not high. They were merely spirit masters responsible for patrolling the coast. Seeing the high priestess appear personally on the coast, they were filled with surprise, but they dared not be negligent in the slightest, so they hurriedly stepped forward to greet her. After finishing their salute, their gazes fell unanimously upon Sumo. Their eyes filled with curiosity and scrutiny. However, they did not hold the slightest bit of contempt just because Sumo looked young. In their view, someone who could be personally accompanied by the high priestess must be extraordinary and certainly not as simple as they appeared on the surface. Bo Saixi said, "Rise. Remember this person beside me. From now on, he is an honored guest of Sea God Island, and you are not to be negligent in the slightest." Several yellow-robed spirit masters quickly bowed and replied, "Yes, High Priestess, we will remember." You may all withdraw," Bo Saixi said. The yellow-robed spirit masters dared not linger and quickly bowed to take their leave, leaving only Sumo and Bo Saixi standing on the coast. At this moment, Sumo said with a smile, "I am new here and unfamiliar with the place. I wonder if you could show me around Sea God Island. It would help me get familiar with the environment here." Hearing this, Bo Saixi was momentarily stunned. Sumo actually wanted her to accompany him for a stroll. However, ever since she became the high priestess for the sea god, she had spent every day in the solemn and dignified sea god temple, accompanied by loneliness all day long. She couldn't even remember the last time she had gone for a stroll. That must have been when she was very young. Back then, she was not yet the sea god high priestess, just a young girl. Furthermore, she had never gone for a stroll with a member of the opposite sex. She was the high priestess of the sea god. If she were seen walking on the street with a man, what would the residents of Sea God Island think? That would seem to undermine the dignity of the high priestess. But the sea god had long since issued an oracle to fully cooperate with all of Sumo's requests, and she could not refuse. After a moment of silence, Boseixi finally nodded gently. Very well, then let's go. Hearing this, Sumo curled his lips into a smile and walked ahead towards the dense forest in front. Boseixi put away the sea god scepter in her hand and followed closely behind. Before long the two passed through the dense forest and arrived at the inner sea. The seawater here was just like the ocean outside, surging with waves. Boseixi stopped and pointed to a platform in the very center ahead, her expression carrying piety and awe for the sea god, and said softly, "This is the inner sea. The pillar in the middle is called the Seahorse Sacred Pillar. Any land-based spirit master who wishes to stay on Sea God Island must cross this inner sea, go before the sacred pillar, and accept the sea god's trial. Only by passing the trial can they live on Sea God Island." Sumo looked up and saw that the platform was triangular, and standing upon it was a stone pillar shaped like a sharp cone with complex patterns carved into its surface. Just then a black figure rushed over from the waves of the inner sea. He landed before Boseixi and bowed respectfully. "Greetings, High Priestess." "No need for formalities," Boseixi said softly. "Seahorse, this is Sumo from now on. He is an honored guest of Sea God Island and is not bound by any rules of Sea God Island." This figure in black was none other than Seahorse Douluo, one of the 7 sacred pillar Douluos of Sea God Island. He ranked 4th among the 7 in strength and was mainly responsible for guarding the Seahorse Sacred Pillar, rarely leaving this place. At this moment, Seahorse Douluo straightened up, and as his gaze landed on Sumo, he couldn't help but be startled. He was actually completely unable to sense any spirit power from Su Moit. Was as if the person before him was just an ordinary human. But the more this was the case, the more awe he felt in his heart. This person's strength was likely far greater than his own, otherwise he would not be personally accompanied by the High Priestess, nor would he be exempt from all the rules of Sea God Island. Chapter 132, Seahorse City. "Greetings, Lord Sumo." Seahorse Douluo quickly bowed slightly toward Sumo, his tone respectful. "No need for formalities," Sumo said indifferently. Boseixi looked at Seahorse Douluo and continued to instruct. "Seahorse, tomorrow morning you and the other sacred pillar Douluos come to the Sea God Temple together. Boseixi, your subordinate, will arrive on time tomorrow," Seahorse Douluo replied respectfully. "You may withdraw," Boseixi instructed. "Yes." Seahorse Douluo bowed again in salute. He took a deep look at Sumo, memorizing his appearance in his heart, then returned to the Seahorse Sacred Pillar to continue upholding his duties. "Let's go," Boseixi said. Sumo nodded slightly. Before long Sumo followed Boseixi across the sea within the sea and arrived deep within Sea God Island. Before them stood a magnificent city. Inscribed above the city gate were 3 vigorous and powerful characters: Seahorse City. The two walked side by side into the city. Night had already fallen and the city was illuminated with lights. The shops on both sides of the street were brightly lit. Because of the sea god's protection, the residents of Sea God Island remained very active at night. The cries of street vendors and the laughter of pedestrians rose and fell, and the place was filled with the rich atmosphere of ordinary life. Along the way, when the residents of Sea God Island saw Boseixi, they all stopped and bowed in salute. But when they saw Sumo beside Boseixi, their reverence was tinged with a bit of surprise and curiosity. After Sumo and the other had walked away, a low murmur of discussion arose. The voices were not loud, but they were clear enough for the 2 high-cultivation individuals to hear perfectly. "Who is that man? Why have I never seen him before?" "I don't know. Do you think? Could the Boseixi be in a relationship? I have never seen her walking on the street with a man before. Hey, now that you mention it, it's really possible. But honestly, seeing the Boseixi walking with him, they really look like a talented man and a beautiful woman. They are such a perfect match." In the distance, Sumo remained indifferent upon hearing these discussions. Beside him, Boseixi felt a strange sense of panic rise in her heart upon hearing these words, and her heartbeat involuntarily quickened. She subconsciously turned her head to look at Sumo. Unexpectedly, Sumo also happened to turn his head at that moment. The moment their eyes met, a strange atmosphere filled the air. Boseixi quickly averted her gaze. Sumo smiled and said, "I heard the discussions of those people just now quite clearly. According to them, it seems you have been alone all these years." Sumo naturally knew Boseixi's situation. He was just asking a question he already knew the answer to. Boseixi nodded gently. Ever since becoming the Boseixi, she had spent her days guarding the Sea God Temple, never having thoughts of romance, nor had she ever been moved by any man. For a long time, only endless loneliness had accompanied her. Sumo raised an eyebrow and asked with surprise, "Then I wonder what kind of man would be able to catch your eye?" Upon hearing this, Boseixi was slightly stunned and subconsciously fell into deep thought. What kind of man? She had never thought about this question. If she really had to answer, it would naturally be someone of brilliant talent and immense strength, capable of standing side by side with her. Even if he wasn't stronger than her, he at least shouldn't be too much weaker than her. Suddenly, Sumo's figure involuntarily appeared in her mind. A month ago, when Sumo only had level 90 spirit power, he was already able to crush the deep-sea demon whale king. Even at that time, his strength was already a bit greater than her own. And now Sumo had already achieved a breakthrough to level 96, only one step away from level 97. His strength had likely already reached a level that inspired awe in her. Perhaps only a powerhouse like Sumo would be worthy of her, but as soon as this thought emerged, it was forcibly suppressed by Bo Seixi. Sumo looked to be only in his early 20s while she was nearly 100 years old. The age gap between them was too vast. Furthermore, Sumo was a future god. While she was merely a Bo Seixi of a god, their fates were already predetermined. It should be said that she was simply unworthy of an existence like Sumo. Thinking of this, Bo Seixi quickly cast the distracting thoughts from her mind, regained her composure and said in a low voice, "I don't know, I have never thought about these things." Seeing this, Sumo did not continue to press the issue. The two continued to stroll along the street, chatting about other trivial topics. Most of the time, Sumo took the initiative to start conversations, while Bo Seixi responded softly, occasionally taking the initiative herself to introduce some of the features of Sea God Island, and the atmosphere gradually became more and more harmonious. Along the way, when Sumo saw local snacks on the street, he would occasionally stop to buy some, for instance some sweet soft pastries, fresh grilled seafood. Each item carried a rich island flavor. And he would always naturally offer the first bite to Bo Seixi. Bo Seixi's daily diet and living arrangements were meticulously prepared by designated personnel, all consisting of exquisite and luxurious meals. She had basically never tried these street snacks that carried the atmosphere of ordinary life. She had wanted to politely decline, to maintain her dignified image as the Bo Seixi, but deep down she did not want to refuse Sumo, so she ultimately extended her hand and gently accepted the snack. She tasted it in small bites, the unfamiliar flavor melting on the tip of her tongue, and accompanied by the lively surrounding voices and the gentle sea breeze, an unprecedented sense of warmth and comfort quietly surged into her heart. This was a feeling she had never experienced in nearly 100 years, and Bo Seixi gradually relaxed from her initial restraint and discomfort. By now, the night had grown deeper, the sea breeze blowing on them carried a chill, and the pedestrians on the street had gradually dwindled. Bo Seixi stopped, looked at Sumo and said softly, "Sumo, it's getting late now. Why don't I go and arrange a place for you to stay first?" Sumo nodded with a smile. "That would be troubling you. Thank you also for accompanying me for so long today, allowing me to learn a lot about Sea God Island." "You're welcome. Let's go, I'll take you to your accommodation." A trace of a smile appeared on Bo Seixi's face and her tone softened unconsciously. Before long, Bo Seixi brought Sumo to the city lord's mansion in Seahorse City. With Bo Seixi leading the way, the servants of the city lord's mansion did not dare to be the least bit negligent and quickly arranged a spacious room for Sumo. The room was exquisitely decorated, fully furnished, and very comfortable. "I will return now. If you have any needs, just instruct the servants in the mansion or come directly to the Sea God Temple to find me." "All right," Sumo nodded with a smile. "You should rest early too." Bo Seixi gave a soft hum, then turned and left the city lord's mansion, returning all the way to her sleeping quarters behind the Sea God Temple. Her sleeping quarters were spacious and cold, furnished with simple furniture without too many complicated decorations. She sat before her vanity, somewhat dazed, recalling everything that had happened today. Her heart, which had been silent for decades, was actually stirring with waves. Chapter 133, Sea God's Light. The next morning, Sumo rose and left the Seahorse City Lord's mansion, arriving at the foot of Sea God Mountain. Looking up, the white jade-like stone stairs stretched straight upwards. The vast Sea God's light poured down, shrouding the entire stretch of stone stairs in a sacred golden halo. Just then, a red, graceful figure flew out from the Sea God Temple and landed beside Sumo. It was none other than Bo Seixi, holding the Sea God scepter in her hand. The sea breeze blew past, lifting several strands of her long hair. Her expression was as indifferent and noble as ever, but her gaze towards Sumo was a few shades softer than usual. Last night, Sumo's figure had lingered in her mind, causing her to toss and turn, unable to sleep all night. And seeing Sumo again at this moment, an inexplicable joy unexpectedly arose in her heart. "Morning," Sumo said with a faint smile. Bo Seixi smiled slightly. "Sumo, you came to the Sea God Temple so early in the morning. Is there something you need?" Sumo looked at the stone stairs ahead. "I want to try this, may I?" Bo Seixi pondered for a moment before saying, "Of course you may. This is one of the trials only available to those with a black level trial or higher, known as Sea God's Light. The higher you climb the stairs, the greater the pressure you must endure. Although according to the rules of Sea God Island, one was not qualified to set foot here without obtaining a purple level trial or higher, rules are rigid but people are flexible. Sumo's status was special, so he could naturally be an exception." Sumo nodded slightly without saying more, turned and walked towards the stone stairs, lifting his foot to step onto the first stair. The moment his soul landed, a terrifying pressure suddenly struck, and his figure paused slightly. But Sumo quickly adapted to this pressure. With his current foundation, the pressure at this initial stage was not worth mentioning at all. Sumo's expression was calm, his steps steady as he climbed upward step by step. The Sea God's light poured down like a waterfall. With every step up, the pressure increased significantly, but Sumo's footsteps never paused. 100 steps, 200 steps, 300 steps. Sumo climbed upward step by step. Although his speed was not fast, he was as steady as a rock. When he reached the 500th step, Sumo's back was gradually soaked with sweat and his pace had slowed down. But fortunately he possessed 3 pieces of spirit bone, the lowest being of the 100,000-year level, and his torso bone was infinitely close to the million-year level. Although this pressure was terrifying, it was still within his range of tolerance. 600 steps, 700 steps. Sumo's breathing gradually became heavy and the veins on his forehead bulged, but he still gritted his teeth, his footsteps never stopping. When his foot stepped onto the 800th step, the pressure of the sea god's light had already become terrifying to the extreme. Golden light condensed into tangible force, squeezing his physical body from all directions as if wanting to crush his bones, but he did not intend to give up. Instead, he circulated the spirit power within his body and activated his own amplifying spirit ability. In an instant, a warm current surged through his body. The terrifying pressure on Sumo's body suddenly lessened greatly, and he took the opportunity to lift his foot and continue upward. Before long, 900 steps. Behind Sumo, the external spirit bone black gold sword wings unfolded. The moment the sword wings stretched out, the pressure weakened a few more shades. Sumo continued to climb upward 950 steps, 970 steps, 990 steps. Asura domain, activate. A chilling, murderous aura erupted from within him and his aura suddenly climbed as well. With the support of the domain's power, Sumo mustered his strength and suddenly stepped onto the 1000th step. Only one last step remained to reach the top. He stood upon the 1000th step, looking up at the final step. That step was only a foot high, but at this moment it felt as if a chasm lay between them. Sumo took a deep breath. The moment his toe touched the final step, the surrounding pressure suddenly surged. Sumo gritted his teeth, attempting to lift his other foot, only to find he couldn't move it at all. That force was too terrifying. It had already exceeded the limit his current physical body could withstand. Sumo did not force the climb. He immediately withdrew his foot and sat cross-legged on the spot. He closed his eyes, focused his mind, and quickly entered a state of meditative cultivation. Because he felt that the realm bottleneck within his body had already shown signs of loosening, he was clear in his heart that an extreme high-pressure environment like Sea God's Light was the perfect place to accelerate cultivation. Moreover, his previous breakthrough had been too fast, his spirit power had surged by more than 6 levels, and his foundation was inevitably unsteady. He would use the pressure of this Sea God's Light to polish his spirit power foundation, then charge at the bottleneck to reach level 97. This was also one of his purposes for coming to Sea God Island. Just as Sumo entered his meditative state, Boseidon soared up from the foot of the mountain and landed at the top of the stairs in an instant. She held the sea god's scepter, standing quietly at the height, watching Sumo, who was sitting and cultivating, her eyes filled with wonder. She had seen countless spirit masters participating in the god's trial. Some could barely move a step from the very beginning, some could climb dozens of steps on their first attempt, but Sumo had arrived at the 1000th step on his first try. One must know, those who could climb over 100 steps were few and far between in the entire history of Sea God Island, and without exception they all became powerhouses of Sea God Island, such as the current 7 holy pillar Douluos. At this moment the impression of Sumo in her heart deepened by a few more shades. About a quarter of an hour later, several powerful auras swept in from afar, all landing in front of the Sea God Temple. They were the 7 holy pillar Douluos of Sea God Island. Except for Seahorse Douluo, the others were all curiously observing Sumo, who was sitting cross-legged on the stone stairs. On the way here, Seahorse Douluo had already mentioned what happened yesterday. Although they were somewhat prepared in their hearts, seeing Sumo actually cultivating on the 1000th step with their own eyes, they still revealed undisguised shock. Sea Dragon Douluo's pupils shrank. He climbed to the 1000th step. Sea Maiden Douluo covered her red lips, her voice trembling. 1000 steps? How is this possible? Even if we were to try again with our current strength, we could only hold on to about 300 steps, right? As holy pillar Douluos, they had all experienced the black level trial and personally felt the terror of the sea god's light. When they participated in the trial back then, they had only climbed 100 or so steps before reaching their limit. Even with their current strength, they probably wouldn't get much further. And Sumo had actually reached the 1000th step, almost clearing the trial. Enough, Boseidon's voice rang out at the right moment, cold and dignified. The 7 immediately restrained their emotions and bowed in unison. Boseidon said indifferently, no need for formalities, I summoned you here today to tell you something. She paused slightly, her gaze falling on Sumo, who was meditating and cultivating on the stone stairs. His name is Sumo, a level 96 titled Douluo and also a successor of a deity. He is someone for whom Lord Sea God personally descended a divine oracle, ordering Sea God Island to treat him well, so you must not neglect him. As her voice fell, the 7 holy pillar Douluos all changed color. To have such terrifying cultivation at such a young age and to be favored by a deity. Sea Maiden Douluo muttered to herself, her gaze towards Sumo filled with admiration. Sea Spear Douluo's eyes widened. A successor of a deity, does that not mean he could become an existence like Lord Sea God in the future? Chapter 134. Valentine's Day on Sea God Island, alright. Boseixi interrupted the group's discussion in time. Do not disturb his cultivate, you should all return to guard your holy pillars. Boseixi, the seven bowed again and swept off in different directions. Boseixi stood alone on the mountain peak, her gaze falling back onto Sumo. The sun rose and the moon set, the tide rose and the tide receded. 4 months of time passed quietly. During these 4 months, Sumo had not left the sea god steps. He had been cultivating and hunting his foundation under terrifying pressure. As for Boseixi, she would come to see Sumo every day, often staying for a long while. 4 months, over 120 days and nights. Unconsciously, that figure sitting cross-legged on the stone steps had become an indispensable part of Boseixi's life, and she herself had not realized that the gaze she cast toward Sumo had gradually changed from initial appreciation to a much softer look. On this afternoon, Sumo was meditating within the sea god's light. His aura was like a dormant volcano, outwardly calm but inwardly constantly accumulating power. Suddenly, an extremely powerful aura erupted from his body, like a volcanic eruption. Sumo achieved a breakthrough to level 97. Moreover, after being tempered by the pressure of the sea god's light, his foundation had been polished to be incredibly solid without a hint of instability. Sumo suddenly opened his eyes and exhaled a long breath of stale air. It is time to take the last step, Sumo whispered to himself and stood up. He released his buff spirit ability, External Spirit Bone, and Asura Domain. His state was fully maxed out. Sumo lifted his foot and stepped out. The last step, a terrifying pressure suddenly struck. But Sumo was now level 97, and every time a titled Douluo rose a level, although the difficulty increased exponentially, their strength also increased exponentially. The gap of this one step was no longer an unbridgeable chasm. Sumo gritted his teeth and slowly lifted his other foot, pushing forward inch by inch. A moment later, Sumo suddenly stepped onto the last step. The moment he stepped onto the top, all the pressure receded like a tide. Sumo let out a long breath, a satisfied smile appearing at the corners of his mouth. He had finally reached the top. Just then Boseixi quietly appeared before Sumo. Her gaze fell upon Sumo, carrying unconcealable shock. Just now she had been kneeling before the sea god statue in the sea god temple, when she suddenly sensed a terrifying aura erupting outside, and she knew that Sumo had finished his cultivate. She immediately ended her prayers and ran out almost impatiently. You achieved a breakthrough. Boseixi asked in surprise. 4 months from level 90 to level 97, breaking through 7 levels in a row. A chasm that others could not cross in a lifetime seemed as simple as drinking water for Sumo. Just luck, Sumo said with a faint smile, stretching his stiff body. If it weren't for the pressure of the sea god's light, it might have taken a much longer time. Boseixi shook her head helplessly. You are truly humble. She paused, then couldn't help but ask, is your speed of breakthrough always this fast? Sumo thought for a moment. It's not that fast. My innate spirit power is level 20 and you've seen my spirit ring configuration, so this speed is considered normal. Boseixi was silent. She felt like she had been struck. Normal, she had obtained the 8 trials of the sea god and her spirit ring configuration was only 8 black and 1 red. But Sumo's spirit rings from the 5th one onwards were all 100,000 years old. Was this normal? Moreover, she considered her own talent to be quite good, yet she could not achieve breakthroughs as easily as drinking water. By the way, are you busy today? Sumo suddenly asked. Boseixi snapped back to reality. I have nothing to do. Then would you like to take a walk with me? Sumo asked softly. Boseixi nodded gently. Okay. The next moment both their figures swept up and flew toward the foot of Sea God Island. Not long after, the two arrived at a golden beach. The sunlight was just right at this moment. The sea was sparkling and the beach was reflecting waves of silvery light. The waves lapped against the shore, making a rhythmic swishing sound, and a few seabirds circled and chirped in the sky. Sumo and Boseixi strolled side by side on the beach, leaving 2 trails of shallow and deep footprints. The sea breeze blew over, carrying a salty, damp scent, blowing a few strands of Boseixi's long hair. Sumo, may I ask how old you are now? Boseixi hesitated for a moment before asking the question that had been lingering in her mind for a long time. Sumo replied with a smile, I'm not even 19 yet. Ah, so young. Boseixi widened her eyes, her tone filled with surprise. She had thought Sumo should be in his 20s, but she hadn't expected him to be not even 20. I am not small. Boseixi didn't react in time and looked at him in surprise. You aren't even 20 and you aren't small. I am not talking about age. Boseixi was stunned, blinking her eyes. Then what are you talking about? Sumo coughed lightly. It's nothing. Boseixi thought for a long time, but still didn't know what Sumo was talking about. Afterward, the two chatted casually, the atmosphere natural and comfortable. Unconsciously, over an hour had passed. The sun began to set in the west, and the horizon was stained with a layer of orange-red sunset glow. Sumo took Boseixi to the top of a mountain overlooking the sea. The terrain here was extremely high with a wide view in the distance. The surface of the sea shimmered with golden light under the setting sun, and the clouds on the horizon were like burning flames, breathtakingly beautiful. The two sat side by side on a large rock, blowing in the sea breeze and watching the sunset. After a moment of silence, Sumo suddenly spoke. By the way, is there anything special happening on Sea God Island today? On the way here, I saw that the entire Sea God Island had many more decorations and the streets were much livelier than usual. Osexi said softly. Today happens to be the full moon, which is also Sea God Island's once every 7 years, Valentine's Day. After saying this, her expression was a bit unnatural, because today was a very special day, and she and Sumo sitting here watching the sunset felt like they were on a date, but they were not lovers. At this moment, Sumo caught the strangeness in Bo Seixi's expression and the corners of his lips lifted slightly. He suddenly reached out and put his arm around Bo Seixi's slender waist. Bo Seixi felt the strangeness at her waist, her body instantly tense, and she looked sharply at Sumo. You. What are you doing? With her strength, she could have easily dodged immediately, but strangely, she did not make any move. Sumo did not let go, his gaze looking straight into her eyes. I know it might be a bit abrupt, but I still want to say, do you want to spend today's holiday with me? Not just today, but also in the future. Upon hearing this, Bo Seixi's brain instantly went blank. Her heart beat so fast it felt like it was going to jump out of her chest. She, who was usually cold and indifferent, had for the first time ever a flush of crimson on her cheeks. Although she really wanted to agree in her heart, they were simply not a good match. After hesitating for a moment, Bo Seixi forcibly suppressed the waves in her heart and slowly calmed down. She looked at the sunset in the distance and sighed softly. Sorry, the gap between us is too big. Chapter 135, The Bo Seixi's Destiny, a night tour of Sea Dragon City. Although I don't look much older than you, in reality I am decades your senior. Bo Seixi's voice was soft, carrying a hint of faint bitterness. Moreover, you are a future deity while I am merely the Bo Seixi under the command of Lord Sea God. My fate has long been sealed, therefore whether it is age or status we are not a good match. Do you trust me? Sumo asked softly. Bo Seixi was slightly startled. She turned her head to meet Sumo's gaze and subconsciously nodded. Sumo smiled lightly. I can change your destiny. What did you say? Bo Seixi's eyes widened in disbelief. You may not be fully aware, but there are indeed levels of strength among deities. The sea god you serve is a first-class god in the god realm. His power is indeed extraordinary and few exist who can rival him, but as it happens, Sumo paused, the smile on his lips deepening slightly. The god position I have inherited is one of the few that stands above the sea god. Therefore, as long as you are with me, not only can I change your destiny as the Bo Seixi, but I can also take you to the god realm in the future. And since the lifespan of a deity is nearly eternal in the long run, what does this slight age gap even matter? As he spoke, Sumo reached out and gently took Bo Seixi's hand. How about it? Are you willing to spend this year's Sea God Island Valentine's Day with me now? Bo Seixi did not respond immediately. She just stared blankly at Sumo, her emotions surging. Sacrifice was the ultimate end she had known since the day she became the Bo Seixi. But having believed in and revered the sea god since she was young, she had calmly accepted this fate. Over the years, she had fulfilled her duties as Bo Seixi day after day without complaint, never once considering other possibilities. However, if there were another choice, who would willingly sacrifice themselves? Moreover, she had finally met someone who could stir her heart. She also wanted to live on and be with the person she liked. Just like this, quietly watching the sunrise and sunset. Watching the seasons change. Watching all the mountains, rivers, lakes, and seas of this world. Amidst her thoughts, Bo Seixi had already made up her mind. Since Sumo had said so, what reason did she have to hesitate? Bo Seixi gave a soft and she rested her head on Sumo's shoulder, a gentle smile rising at the corners of her mouth. Sumo felt his shoulder sink and a faint fragrance drifted into his nostrils. He did not speak again, only tightening his arm around Bo Seixi's waist. They were quiet for a moment. Bo Seixi suddenly spoke. Sumo, which faction do you come from? With your talent, it should be one of the major powers on the continent. I am from Spirit Hall, Sumo said truthfully. My teacher is the current Supreme Pontiff. Hearing this, Bo Seixi did not show an overly surprised expression. Although she had lived on Sea God Island for a long time, she knew that Spirit Hall was the largest faction on the continent, with countless experts and unfathomable foundations. Given Sumo's talent and strength, it was only natural that he came from a top-tier faction like Spirit Hall. Bo Seixi suddenly raised her head, looking at Sumo with hesitation, her expression conflicted. Ask whatever you want to ask, Sumo said in a gentle tone. I will answer truthfully. Bo Seixi hesitated for a long while before finally asking, Are there other women by your side? She knew this question was somewhat inappropriate, but she couldn't help herself. She also understood that with Sumo's talent, background, appearance, and the composure and confidence he exuded inadvertently, all of this had a fatal attraction to women. Even someone like her, who hadn't felt a stir in her heart for nearly 100 years, had found Sumo leaving a deep mark in her heart after only a few months of being together. Therefore, in her view, it was very likely that Sumo already had other confidants by his side. but she still faintly hoped that she was Sumo's only one. However, Sumo did not answer directly but instead asked a question in return. Would you mind? Boseiki immediately understood Sumo's meaning. Although he didn't say it explicitly, this sentence had already said everything. At this moment, a trace of estrangement rose in Boseiki's heart, as if something was blocking her chest, feeling stuffy and uncomfortable. But she quickly pushed this displeasure down because she liked Sumo and wanted to be with him always. And for someone like Sumo to take a fancy to her, be willing to help her escape her predetermined fate, and even promise to take her to the god realm in the future, was already her great fortune. So what right did she have to be picky? Besides, having seen a heaven-gifted genius like Sumo, could any other man in the world catch her eye? The answer was negative. Boseiki smiled faintly. I don't mind. Sumo stroked her head and said softly, I know you must feel a bit uncomfortable, but I promise you I will treat you all equally and I will never let you down in the future. Boseiki nodded gently, and the trace of estrangement in her heart dissipated a little because of Sumo's words. The two fell silent. The whole world seemed to quiet down, leaving only the sound of the waves and each other's heartbeats. They just snuggled like that, watching the sunset sink into the sea little by little. When only the last glimmer of light remained on the horizon, Sumo stood up and reached out to Boseiki. Let's go, accompany me to see the Valentine's Day on Sea God Island. Boseiki looked at the palm reaching out to her, hesitated slightly, but finally raised her hand and gently placed it on top. The two figures rose, flying down from the mountain peak towards the nearest city. Before long they arrived at Sea Dragon City. This city was managed by Sea Dragon Douluo, the head of the 7 holy pillars, and its scale was far larger than Seahorse City. The moment she walked through the city gate, Boseiki subconsciously tightened her grip on Sumo's hand. Although she was the high and mighty Boseiki at heart, she was still a little woman who had never been in love. Making such an intimate gesture in public for the first time, it was inevitable that she would be nervous. At this time, Sea Dragon City was filled with a festive atmosphere. The streets were crowded with people, young men and women everywhere. The moment Sumo walked into the crowd holding Boseiki's hand, almost everyone's eyes were drawn to them. Wow, look, is that the Boseiki? Oh my god, it really is the Boseiki. Is she actually holding hands with a man? Am I seeing things? You're not seeing things, the Boseiki is actually dating. They must be here to celebrate Valentine's Day, right? The surrounding discussions rose one after another, full of surprise and amazement, mixed with envy and sincere blessings. Listening to the whispers in her ears, Boseiki's cheeks instantly flushed red, and she hurriedly lowered her head, wishing she could find a crack in the ground to crawl into. She had held the position of Boseiki for decades, and was the leader of the people on Sea God Island. But now she was walking down the street holding hands with Sumo, being watched by everyone. For a moment she felt that her usual dignified and majestic image was no longer there. Chapter 136, Releasing Lanterns. The shy Boseiki. Don't be nervous. Sumo squeezed her hand and said in a low voice, let them talk, there's no need to take it to heart. From now on, with me here, you no longer need to carry the burden of the Boseiki, just being your truest self is enough. Hearing this, Boseiki looked up and met Sumo's smiling eyes, and the unease and nervousness in her heart quietly dissipated by more than half. She took a deep breath, gave a soft hum of acknowledgement, and gradually regained her usual composure. As a level 99 Super Douluo, what kind of storms had she not seen? It was just holding hands, right? What was the big deal about that? It wasn't like it was something shameful. Thinking this way, Boseiki gradually relaxed. The two did not stroll for long before night fully descended. At this moment, the moon hung high in the sky like a silver platter, shrouding Sea Dragon City in a silver glow. The atmosphere on the main street became increasingly lively, with couples holding hands everywhere and laughter and chatter filling the air. Some were confessing their love under the moonlight, some were exchanging small gifts, some were releasing lanterns by the water, and others were kissing in public, completely unconcerned with the gazes of others. Sumo also brought Boseiki along to experience the various customs of Sea God Island's Valentine's Day. They first came to a small stall selling lanterns. The stall owner was a kind-faced old woman, and when she saw Boseiki, she was so surprised that she almost dropped the lantern in her hand. But she quickly came to her senses and enthusiastically greeted the two. Boseiki, my lord, would you like to buy 2 lanterns? Releasing lanterns on the night of the full moon is an old tradition here on Sea God Island. As long as 2 people release lanterns together, Lord Sea God will bless you to be together for a long, long time. Upon hearing this, Boseiki glanced at Sumo, smiled and paid for 2 lanterns. Sumo handed one of them to Boseiki. Write something down and make a wish. Boseiki took the lantern, her slender, jade-like fingers gently brushing over the surface of the lantern. After a moment's thought, she took a brush from the stall owner, lowered her head and wrote a line of words on the lantern. Her body was slightly turned, deliberately shielding it, fearing that Sumo beside her would see the content. On the other side, Sumo was casual and unrestrained, wielding the brush with ease and forming his sentence in an instant. What did you write? Boseiki asked softly, her eyes full of curiosity. You go first. I won't tell you. Boseiki rarely showed such a girlish demeanor. Then I won't tell you either, Sumo said with a smile. Bo Seixi gave a soft huff. Fine, I won't look then. Immediately after, the two each held their own lanterns and slowly walked toward the place in the city where lanterns were released. That was a small inland sea, and the surface of the water was not turbulent. At this time the shore was already crowded with couples, and when everyone saw Bo Seixi appear, they all sincerely offered their heartfelt blessings. Listening to the blessings filling her ears, Bo Seixi felt very happy in her heart. Before long, the two squatted side by side on the shore and together gently placed their lanterns onto the water's surface. The two lanterns swayed gently on the water before slowly drifting away along with the ripples. Bo Seixi gazed at the lanterns as they gradually drifted away, silently reciting the wish she had just written in her heart. May I spend this life together with Sumo, never to be parted. After releasing the lanterns, Sumo took her hand again and they wove through the various stalls of the night market, playing together for a long time. By now, the night had deepened, the flow of people on the street was slowly dispersing, and the bustling night market had gradually quieted down. Let's go back, Sumo said. Okay, Bo Seixi replied with a smile. The two strolled on the road back to see God Mountain, with the moonlight spilling onto the ground, stretching their shadows long. The smile on Bo Seixi's lips never faded in the slightest, because today was the happiest day she had ever spent in her life. In the past, as the aloof and high-ranking Bo Seixi of Sea God Island, she had always been cold and lonely. But today she finally cast off the shackles of the Bo Seixi, and like an ordinary woman she walked hand in hand with her beloved through the streets and alleys, doing ordinary yet incredibly happy little things. Before long, Sumo and Bo Seixi returned to her sleeping palace. Sumo had absolutely no intention of returning to Seahorse City. Sleeping alone could never compare to being accompanied by the beauty in his arms. Sumo looked around and chuckled. The decor of your sleeping palace is quite elegant and simple. Bo Seixi gave a soft response, her heart pounding. Although she had never been involved in romance between a man and a woman, she still knew what could happen when a man and a woman were alone in the dead of night. I'll go bathe first. Bo Seixi was flustered and, without waiting for Sumo's response, hurried toward the side hall. At this moment, she had completely lost the dignity and poise of the sea god island Bo Seixi, instead resembling a shy and timid young girl. Sumo watched her flustered back, shook his head with a smile, then sat down in the hall and waited quietly. About half an hour later, Bo Seixi slowly walked out of the side hall. Hearing the soft footsteps, Sumo raised his eyes to look. He saw that Bo Seixi had already changed into a white nightgown, which complemented her hair color perfectly. Her damp, long hair was draped over her shoulders, thin white straps rested lightly on her delicate collarbone, and the neckline vaguely revealed a hint of snow-white skin. The silk skirt hem draped softly, outlining her graceful figure, and the hem fell above her knees, revealing her fair, slender legs. She lowered her eyes, extremely shy, and dared not meet Sumo's gaze at all. Sumo, I'm done, you can go. Voice was very soft. If Sumo's cultivation base were not powerful, he probably wouldn't have heard it. Okay, Sumo replied calmly. He walked into the bathroom, where a faint, elegant fragrance still lingered in the air, perhaps the scent left behind by Bo Seixi. Sumo bathed quickly. In just over 10 minutes he had changed into clean clothes and walked out of the bathroom with composure. At this time, Bo Seixi was sitting on the bed, her hands folded on her lap. Sumo walked to her side, bent down to pick her up, turned and sat down, placing her sideways on his lap. Seixi gave a soft cry, her hands subconsciously wrapping around Sumo's neck. The tips of her ears instantly turned crimson, her eyes lowered, and she dared not look up at Sumo the entire time. At this moment, Sumo raised one hand, his fingertips gently stroking her cheek. The touch was delicate and smooth, no different from that of a young girl's skin. Zixi, if you aren't prepared, I can give you time, Sumo said in a low voice. Upon hearing the name Zixi, Bo Seixi's heart gave a violent jolt. This was the first time someone had called her that. Although it was a bit awkward since this person was Sumo, that awkwardness instantly turned into warmth in the depths of her heart. She was silent for a moment, as if she had made a great determination, and said in a soft yet firm voice, I can do it. Upon hearing this, Sumo did not hesitate, lifted her chin and slowly leaned in. Seixi's eyes widened instantly, her mind went blank and her whole body stiffened. But soon she closed her eyes, slowly relaxed her body, and with a bit of clumsiness responded to Sumo's gentleness. Before long the two completely entered a state of cultivate. Only at this moment did Bo Seixi completely understand that what Sumo said this afternoon really wasn't about age. It was simply full and fulfilling. Chapter 137, Spirit Hall discovers Sea God Island. The next day, the sun was high in the sky. Inside Bo Seixi's bedchamber, Bo Seixi was nestled in Sumo's embrace. Between her brows there was a hint of fatigue, and her breathing was light and even. She was clearly still fast asleep. Sumo looked down at Bo Seixi in his arms, his gaze gentle. He had actually been awake for quite some time, but he hadn't moved, fearing he might disturb Bo Seixi in his arms. Just then Bo Seixi's long eyelashes fluttered slightly, and she slowly opened her eyes. Upon seeing the handsome face before her, her eyes instantly softened. Awake. Sumo chuckled, stroking her head. Bo Saixi gave a soft hum, her voice filled with the languor of having just woken up. She did not get up immediately but instead nuzzled further into Sumo's embrace, as if reluctant to leave this warm hold. It was as if she were a completely different person from the Bo Saixi who usually carried an aura of stern authority. Suddenly, Bo Saixi looked up, her beautiful eyes filled with a hint of reproach, and she said softly, "It's all your fault. I didn't go to kneel and worship Sea God today." Last night she and Sumo had cultivated for almost the entire night. Even with her formidable strength, she was somewhat exhausted. Therefore, she hadn't risen early to worship Sea God as she usually did, but had slept until now. For the first time in decades, she had missed her morning prayer. Oh, Sumo raised an eyebrow upon hearing this, teasing, "I wonder who it was later." You are not allowed to say it." Bo Saixi's face instantly flushed red. She hurriedly raised her hand to cover Sumo's mouth, not letting him continue. Sumo pulled her hand down, held it in his palm, and said with a doting tone, "All right, I won't say it." Afterward, the two stayed together affectionately for a long time, and it wasn't until noon that they finally left the bedchamber. In the days that followed, Sumo stayed on Sea God Island. He had cultivated for over a decade and had finally reached his current realm, so it was only natural that he should enjoy himself for a while. As for the god's trial, there was plenty of time, so he would go after a while. A few days later, Spirit City, Supreme Pontiff Palace. The massive statue of Angel God stood above the Great Hall, wings spread wide, overlooking all living beings. Inside the hall, Qian Xunji sat upright on the Supreme Pontiff throne, wearing the Supreme Pontiff crown and holding the Supreme Pontiff scepter. Below him stood Yu Guan and Gui Mei. It is worth mentioning that Yu Guan and Gui Mei were now level 96 titled Douluo, having already surpassed their original limits. Of course, given their strength, they could naturally enter the Hall of Worship and become higher-ranking worship elders, but they had no such intention. The reason was simple. In their view, the future Supreme Pontiff would undoubtedly be the saint, Sumo, and they were Sumo's most loyal followers. Therefore, they were waiting for Sumo to become Supreme Pontiff so they could serve him wholeheartedly and repay his kindness for transforming them. Just then, a palace guard knight in silver armor, holding a secret letter, walked quickly into the Supreme Pontiff Palace. He reached the center of the hall, knelt on one knee, lowered his head, and respectfully presented the secret letter with both hands. "Reporting to Your Excellency the Supreme Pontiff, a letter has arrived from the vast Sea City Spirit Hall branch." Qian Xunji's gaze swept over the secret letter, then immediately turned to Yu Guan. Yue Guan understood immediately. His figure flashed, and he appeared before the knight, took the secret letter, and turned to hand it to Qian Xunji. "You may withdraw." Qian Xunji waved his hand. "Yes." The palace guard knight acknowledged, stood up, backed away a few steps, and then turned to exit the Supreme Pontiff Palace. At this moment, Qian Xunji opened the secret letter, took out the letter paper inside, and unfolded it to read carefully. His gaze moved slowly across the paper, and the expression on his face changed from initial indifference to gradually becoming serious. In the end, a trace of a smile appeared at the corners of his mouth. The content of the letter was roughly: Spirit Hall personnel had accidentally discovered an island where spirit masters lived, but detailed information regarding the specific number of people and the distribution of strength on that island remained unknown. And that island was none other than Sea God Island. Sea God Island. This name was extremely unfamiliar to the vast majority of people on the continent, because it was far from the continent, and combined with the fierce devil spirit great white sharks inhabiting the surrounding waters, ordinary spirit masters could not approach it, let alone land on the island. Therefore, Sea God Island was like a secluded paradise, maintaining its independence and mystery for thousands of years. But Spirit Hall's intelligence network was, after all, very powerful. Not long ago, the person in charge of the vast Sea City Spirit Hall branch had accidentally heard rumors about Sea God Island from a merchant returning from a long voyage. After layers of investigation and confirmation, they finally obtained the general situation of Sea God Island. "Yu Guan, Gui Mei, what do you think?" Qian Xunji sent the secret letter through the air. It floated toward the two as if supported by an invisible hand. Yue Guan took it first, and together with Gui Mei they read it. A moment later, Yu Guan looked up, his eyes flashing with excitement. He spoke first, his voice sharp. "Your Excellency Supreme Pontiff, on the entire continent, except for the two great empires, sect forces, and some loose cultivators who dislike restraint, all other spirit masters are controlled by Spirit Hall. Now that a new gathering place for spirit masters has been discovered, this island should rightfully be under the control of Spirit Hall. The spirit masters there should also accept the jurisdiction of Spirit Hall. This subordinate is willing to go personally to conquer this overseas land for Spirit Hall. This subordinate is also willing to go." Gui Mei immediately added. Upon hearing this, Qian Xunji couldn't help but laugh out loud. The laughter echoed in the vast hall, carrying an air of arrogance and confidence that looked down upon the world. "Good, I have the exact same intention. The glory of Angel God shall shine upon every corner of the continent." Whether it be land or ocean, Qian Xunji stood up from the throne holding his scepter, his gaze like torches, his voice loud as a bell. Gui Mei, Yu Guan, you two immediately go down and select 2,000 elite spirit masters to be led by you two. Depart for overseas tomorrow, incorporate all the spirit masters on that island and spread the glory of Angel God. Although he didn't know the strength of the spirit masters on that island, Qian Xunji was full of confidence in this trip. The current Yu Guan and Gui Mei were both level 96 titled Douluo, and they also possessed 100,000-year spirit rings and 100,000-year spirit bones. Looking at the entire continent, spirit masters who could reach the level of titled Douluo were as rare as phoenix feathers. Could a barren overseas island possibly have any powerful spirit masters? And even if there were one or two titled Douluo on that island, how could they possibly be a match for us, the Chrysanthemum and Ghost duo? Yes, we accept the order. Yu Guan and Gui Mei both knelt on one knee, their voices respectful and powerful. Both of them had expressions of eagerness on their faces. Ever since they obtained their 100,000-year spirit rings and spirit bones, they hadn't had a chance to make a move. Now that they finally had an opportunity to flex their muscles, both of them could hardly suppress the battle intent in their hearts. Chapter 138. Attacking Sea God Island. After Yu Guan and Gui Mei exited the Supreme Pontiff Palace, they began to select elites from the Spirit Masters directly under Spirit Hall to form an expeditionary force. Before long, a dense crowd of Spirit Masters had gathered in the plaza in front of the Supreme Pontiff Palace. Yue Guan and Gui Mei stood at the front of the formation to conduct a final inspection. Yue Guan said, "This voyage is to spread the glory of the Angel God, and every one of you is an elite of Spirit Hall. If this mission succeeds, you will all be heavily rewarded. Anyone shrinks back in the face of battle or is cowardly, do not blame me for being heartless." Such a large-scale operation in Spirit City naturally attracted the attention of many, including Bibi Dong. She came to the Supreme Pontiff Palace out of curiosity. "Greetings, teacher." Bibi Dong bowed respectfully. Seeing Bibi Dong arrive, Qian Xunji immediately revealed a kind smile. "Donger, why have you come?" "Teacher, why is there such a commotion outside? Is Spirit Hall planning some kind of operation?" Bibi Dong asked curiously. Qian Xunji smiled and did not hide anything, briefly explaining the situation regarding Sea God Island. After listening, Bibi Dong immediately spoke up. "Teacher, this disciple also wishes to go." Upon hearing this, the smile on Qian Xunji's face immediately faded slightly and he looked hesitant. He frowned and said, "Donger, the specific strength of that island is still unclear and everything is still an unknown. If something were to happen to you, how would I explain it to Xiao Mo?" Given the relationship between Sumo and Bibi Dong, if something were to happen to her, Qian Xunji dared not even imagine how Sumo would react upon his return. "Teacher, please rest assured. I am now level 73 Spirit Saint, and with Elder Yu Guan and Elder Gui present I will be fine. Furthermore, as the Wuhan Hall Holy Maiden, I have been focused on cultivate all these years, and have never made any substantial contribution to Spirit Hall. Now that this matter has arisen, I should certainly do my part. I implore you, teacher, to grant your permission for this disciple to go." Qian Xunji found himself in a dilemma. He pondered for a long time before finally sighing softly. "Fine, if you want to go, then go. But you must be extremely careful, do not try to be a hero, and you must obey all arrangements made by Yu Guan and Gui Mei." With two level 96 titled Douluo in command, along with 2,000 elite spirit masters accompanying them, if such a lineup couldn't protect Bibi Dong, it would be truly inexcusable. Moreover, what Bibi Dong said made sense. She truly needed some experience and could not always remain a flower in a greenhouse. "Thank you, teacher." A brilliant smile appeared on Bibi Dong's face. "Then I will go back and prepare." Ahead, Qian Xunji nodded slightly. Bibi Dong exited the Supreme Pontiff Palace and returned to the Holy Sun's palace with light steps. She pulled Yin and Yi Qingshuang together, and the three of them sat around the sofa in the palace. Bibi Dong briefly explained the situation regarding Sea God Island. "Sister, can I go?" Yin asked, looking at Bibi Dong with burning eyes. "I am already in my mature phase now. All these years I have stayed in the Holy Sun's palace. Now that I have finally managed to cultivate to the mature phase, I also want to go out and take a look around." Yin was now level 62. Once a transformed spirit beast cultivates to level 60 or above, it enters the mature phase and is indistinguishable from a human. Even a titled Douluo cannot discern their true identity. Therefore, Yin no longer needed to be as cautious as before and could walk outside openly. "Want to go too?" Yi Qingshuang immediately chimed in. "With me here, you don't have to worry about getting injured. I will always be in the rear healing everyone, and I guarantee I won't hold you back." Yi Qingshuang was now a level 66 Spirit Emperor. And with her heart of the Saint Begonia spirit, as long as she had spirit power, it would be difficult for her teammates to die. Bibi Dong looked at Yin, then at Yi Qingshuang and finally nodded. "All right, but you must stay by my side at all times, especially Qingshuang." "I know, Sister Donger." Yi Qingshuang nodded and smiled. "Don't worry, I will definitely stay close to you." "Me too, sister, don't worry." Yin also added with a smile. The three of them smiled at each other, their hearts filled with anticipation. For them, this was not just a simple expedition but a rare adventure, a chance for them to step out of their comfort zone and see a wider world. Several days later, vast sea city at the harbor, dozens of large ships were moored neatly at the dock, waiting to set sail. Before long, the mighty force of 2,000 Spirit Hall spirit masters boarded the ships in an orderly fashion. Once everyone had boarded, the dozens of large ships sailed out of the harbor one after another, entering the vast ocean. On the leading ship, Bibi Dong and the other two women stood on the deck. The sea breeze was strong, causing their clothes to flutter loudly and their long hair to fly in the wind. Bibi Dong narrowed her eyes slightly, gazing out at the endless azure in the distance. "This is my first time out at sea. The ocean is truly beautiful," she remarked sincerely, her tone filled with intoxication. "It really is quite beautiful. It's my first time seeing the ocean too," Yin replied. She had always been rooted in the blue-silver forest, and the largest bodies of water she had ever seen were merely the lakes and rivers within the forest. She had never seen an ocean like this, boundless and merging with the sky. Seeing it with her own eyes now, the shock was difficult to describe in words. At this moment, Yi Qingshuang, who was beside them, also spoke up. "I have seen the ocean before, but I have never been out to sea." Just as the three women were admiring the seascape, the figure of Gui Mei suddenly appeared on the deck and bowed slightly to Bibi Dong. "Your Highness, the wind on the sea is strong and the journey is long. Your subordinate has prepared food and hot drinks. I invite your Highness and the two young ladies to move to the cabin to rest." Bibi Dong turned around and nodded slightly. "I understand, thank you, Elder Gui. I am indeed a bit hungry." Yin said with a giggle. "Sister Donger, let's go eat something quickly." "All right," Bibi Dong replied. Soon the three of them disappeared into the cabin entrance. Gui Mei watched the three leave before fading back into the shadows to continue his guard duty. His primary responsibility was to protect the safety of the three women. The fleet sailed along. Because Sumo had already killed the deep-sea demon whale king, the current sea area was no longer as dangerous. Although there were many powerful sea spirit beasts with Yu Guan and Gui Mei present, they did not encounter any accidents along the way. Occasionally, a few spirit beasts attempted to attack the fleet, but they were easily dealt with. Even Yu Guan and Gui Mei did not need to take action. The powerhouses within the Spirit Master team resolved them. After sailing for several days, the fleet finally entered the outer waters of Sea God Island. At this moment, the silhouette of Sea God Island had already come into view. Chapter 139, They Are All Our Own People, Why Fight? Chrysanthemum Pass. Is that the island ahead that we are here to annex? On the deck of the main ship, Bibi Dong's gaze swept across the sea, looking straight towards the junction of sea and sky. Yue Guan said, "Replying to your Highness Holy Maiden, according to the sea chart and coordinates provided by the Spirit Hall branch in Vast Sea City, the destination for this trip is straight ahead." Beside him, Gui Mei said in a deep voice, "Your Highness Holy Maiden and Miss Yin, Miss Yi, if a fight breaks out later, you must protect yourselves well and not try to be brave." Bibi Dong said calmly, "Elder Gui does not need to worry too much. I am a spirit saint after all, more than enough to protect myself." "That's right, Elder Gui," Yi Qingshuang immediately echoed. "Our cultivation is not weak either. We will definitely not hold you back." Yin also nodded gently, her voice soft yet firm. "We will be extra careful and will definitely not cause you any trouble." However, at this moment Yu Guan's expression suddenly tightened and his figure rose into the air, standing in midair. "Everyone, enter combat readiness immediately." Yu Guan channeled his spirit power to wrap around his voice, which had strong penetrating power, spreading to all the accompanying ships behind. The spirit masters of Spirit Hall on the deck moved upon hearing the command, their actions swift and orderly without any hesitation. In the blink of an eye, they formed neat rows, their expressions solemn and their auras steady. Anyone could see that these people were by no means ordinary. They were an elite force, well-trained and battle-hardened. On the deck below, Bibi Dong frowned slightly and asked in a deep voice, "Elder Gui, what happened?" She was currently only at the Spirit Saint level, and her perception was far inferior to the 96th level Chrysanthemum Pass and Gui Mei. Within her range of perception, there was nothing unusual. Gui Mei's face was solemn, his gaze fixed on the direction of Sea God Island, and he said in a deep voice, "There is a large number of sea spirit beasts approaching us from ahead, hundreds of them, and among them is a 100,000-year spirit beast." He paused, his tone becoming increasingly heavy. "Although Chrysanthemum Pass and I are at level 96, this is the ocean and we cannot unleash our full strength. Sea spirit beasts receive a huge boost in the ocean, making them far more formidable than on land. Even if the two of us join forces, it will be difficult to take down a 100,000-year spirit beast in a short time." "A 100,000-year spirit beast," Bibi Dong exclaimed, the calmness on her face instantly fading, replaced by profound solemnity. "Exactly, Your Highness Holy Maiden, and you too, please protect yourselves well later and do not get close. I will go help Chrysanthemum Pass." After Gui Mei finished his instructions, his figure flashed and he leapt to Yu Guan's side, standing shoulder to shoulder with him. Before long, the sea area within everyone's sight began to churn violently, and white figures darted across the sea surface, speeding towards the fleet. Yue Guan narrowed his eyes. "It's actually a school of devil spirit great white sharks." Prepare to meet the enemy. Uime shouted sternly, "Do not let any sea spirit beast get close to the main ship. You must ensure the safety of your highness, holy maiden." At this time golden petals floated around Yu Guan, and the singular velvet sky chrysanthemum spirit condensed in his palm. Uime's body radiated a cold aura and he released his ghost spirit. Under their feet both had the optimal spirit ring configuration of 2 yellow, 2 purple, 4 black, and 1 red. Meanwhile, the group of Spirit Hall experts on the deck below also channeled their spirit power, released their spirits, and stood ready. In an instant, spirit rings of various colors appeared one after another, yellow, purple, and black intertwined, shining brilliantly. In this team, even the lowest cultivation was at the spirit ancestor level, and there were several spirit Douluo sitting in command. Their strength was not to be underestimated. The sea breeze whistled across the deck, and the waves slammed fiercely against the ship, instantly plunging the entire fleet into a tense, sword-drawn atmosphere. Soon, the school of devil spirit great white sharks stopped 100 meters away from the fleet, confronting them from afar. "Humans, ahead is the forbidden land of Sea God Island. Leave immediately or be killed without mercy." The leader of the devil spirit great white shark, Xiao Bai, floated on the sea surface and spoke in human language. Xiao Bai did not act immediately on the ocean, although she had the confidence to fight Chrysanthemum Pass and Gui Mei. The number of experts on the other side far exceeded her clan. Once a war started, her clan would definitely suffer heavy casualties. Therefore, Xiao Bai did not want to act easily. Upon hearing this, the two in midair, Chrysanthemum Pass and Gui Mei, were stunned, momentarily at a loss. These devil spirit great white sharks were actually guarding the island ahead, but wasn't that island a gathering place for human spirit masters? How could there be 100,000-year spirit beast guarding it? Could spirit beasts and humans coexist harmoniously? At this time Yu Guan spoke in a cold voice. "HMPH, I didn't expect this isolated overseas island to be guarded by a 100,000-year spirit beast. However," he paused, his tone becoming more aggressive, "we are here under the orders of the Supreme Pontiff to annex the spirit masters on the island and spread the glory of the angel god. If you insist on being an enemy of Spirit Hall today, don't blame us for being impolite. Do you really think that your clan alone can stop our elite force of Spirit Hall?" Actually, Yu Guan and Gui Mei were quite tempted by this 100,000-year devil spirit great white shark. After all, a 100,000-year spirit bone was a treasure that every spirit master dreamed of. But their primary mission on this trip was to subdue Sea God Island. If they got into a life-and-death battle with the devil spirit great white sharks here, and there happened to be hidden experts on the island, their poor condition would likely lead to failure. So they didn't really want to fight either. Xiao Bai was stunned upon hearing this, a hint of strangeness flashing in her eyes. "Wait, are you people from Spirit Hall?" Yu Guan snorted coldly, his tone carrying a bit of arrogance. "Oh. I didn't expect you to have heard of the prestige of Spirit Hall. In that case, be sensible and back off, don't block our way or don't blame us for being impolite." Xiao Bai ignored Yu Guan's threat and instead asked earnestly, "Do you know Lord Sumo?" As soon as these words were spoken, the whole scene fell into dead silence. Yue Guan and Gui Mei were both stunned, expressions of disbelief appearing on their faces. On the deck below, the three women, Bibi Dong, Yin, and Yi Qingshuang, were all stunned, their eyes full of surprise and confusion. This 100,000-year devil spirit great white shark actually knew Sumo, and even called him Lord Sumo. "You know our saint of Spirit Hall?" Yu Guan asked tentatively. "That's right, Lord Sumo has been on Sea God Island for some time and he is already with our Bo Saixi. The two are very much in love. If you insist on attacking Sea God Island, aren't you afraid of Lord Sumo's wrath?" The news that Sumo and Bo Saixi were together was now known to everyone on the entire Sea God Island. And not long ago Xiao Bai also learned of Sumo's background. Yue Guan and Gui Mei looked at each other, unable to say a word for a long while. They had come under the orders of the Supreme Pontiff, aggressively bringing 2,000 elites to annex Sea God Island. They had set up formations and displayed their spirits, ready to fight at any moment. As a result, after all that fuss, their own saint was already on this island, not only on the island but he had also taken down the Bo Saixi of Sea God Island. Then what were they here to annex? Why fight at all? Aren't they all their own people now? Chapter 140. Severely punishing Sumo. Since everyone is on our side, may we board the island? Yu Guan suppressed the complex emotions in his heart and said to the distant Xiao Bai, "Apologies, Sea God Island does not allow outside spirit masters to enter. Please wait here for a moment. I will go notify the Bo Saixi and Lord Sumo." Although the people from the Spirit Hall could barely count as being on the same side, Sea God Island had its own rules. To enter one must first obtain the consent of the Bo Saixi. Yue Guan nodded slightly. "Very well." Soon at Xiao Bai's command, hundreds of devil spirit great white sharks swam rapidly in the direction of Sea God Island. Meanwhile, on the deck of the main ship, Bibi Dong stood at the bow, her gaze fixed on the group of devil spirit great white sharks moving into the distance. Her expression was as calm as water, revealing no emotional fluctuations. But if one observed closely, one could see that her hands hanging by her sides were tightly clenched, revealing the turbulence in her heart. It wasn't that she was feeling life chi, nor was she blaming Sumo. It was just that she couldn't help feeling a bit sour inside. Over the past 6 months, she had been thinking of Sumo day and night. While focusing on her cultivate, her mind was filled with nothing but his image. She was full of anticipation for Sumo to return to Spirit City and come back to her side as soon as possible. But now, having finally received news of him, she learned that he was in this overseas land, living day and night with another woman. Naturally, she would not feel good about this. Yin and Yi Qingshuang had completely different reactions. Yin's eyes were filled with anticipation and joy. That's great, it's been half a year since we last saw Sumo. I didn't expect him to be on that island. We can finally see him again. Yi Qingshuang nodded with a smile. Indeed, a moment ago I thought we were going to have a big battle, but as it turns out, Sumo has already taken down their Bo Seixi. But come to think of it, this guy Sumo really can't stay quiet wherever he goes. He actually found us another sister. He's becoming more and more flirtatious. Hearing their whispers, Bibi Dong sighed slightly and her tightly clenched hands quietly relaxed. A helpless smile appeared on her face. You two are quite open-minded. Are you not feeling any life kai at all? Yin said softly. It's alright, and feeling life kai is useless anyway. Exactly, Yi Qingshuang agreed. Instead of feeling life kai here, we should think about how to punish him when we see him later. He hasn't come back to see us for half a year, having fun on this island by himself. We must punish him properly. Let's make him unable to get out of bed for 3 days. Yi Qingshuang had always lived up to her name, cold and frosty. But ever since she had been grinding out the spirit fusion with Sumo, she seemed to have triggered some mysterious switch. Her entire person had undergone a huge change, becoming a completely different person from her past image. Hearing this, the gentle and thin-skinned Yin immediately blushed and she chided in a low voice. How is this a punishment? This is clearly. Of course it's a punishment, Yi Qingshuang said with a grin. What, do you think it's too light? Then how about we add a few more days? Stop talking. Yin's face turned even redder. Just as the three women were whispering, 2 streams of light cut across the sea from the direction of Sea God Island, arriving above the fleet in an instant. The spirit masters from Spirit Hall on the deck were initially somewhat vigilant, but when they saw who it was, all their vigilance vanished instantly. The next moment, everyone knelt on one knee in unison, their voices ringing out like bells echoing across the entire sea. Greetings, Your Highness the Saint. Yes, the person who arrived was none other than Sumo, and beside him was the Bo Seixi. At this moment, the Bo Seixi was completely different from before, with a special charm added to her brows. Rise, Sumo's voice was not loud, but it clearly spread across the entire fleet. After saying this, he and the Bo Seixi flashed and landed on the deck of the main ship. For a moment, the atmosphere on the deck became somewhat subtle. The gazes of Bibi Dong and the other 2 women were locked onto the Bo Seixi almost simultaneously. The Bo Seixi possessed a unique charm of a mature woman that the 3 of them could not compare to. What surprised them even more was that the Bo Seixi was actually a titled Douluo, with strength far greater than the 3 of them. At the same time, the Bo Seixi was also carefully sizing up Bibi Dong and the other 2 women before her, and a trace of astonishment could not help but arise in her heart. 3 women, 3 completely different kinds of beauty. The Bo Seixi sighed inwardly. This guy Sumo really had good fortune with women. After a brief silence, Sumo broke the deadlock. He spoke in a natural tone, smiling as he briefly introduced them. This is the Bo Seixi of Sea God Island. These 3 are Bibi Dong, Yin, and Yi Qingshuang. Women nodded and greeted each other. Although the atmosphere remained somewhat subtle, there was a hint of probing in their eyes, but overall it was harmonious and there was no tense situation. At this time, Sumo looked up at the 2 people, Ju and Gui, in the distance. The 2 were quite sensible. Since Sumo appeared, they hadn't stepped forward to disturb them, just watching quietly. When they saw Sumo's gaze fall upon them, the 2, Ju and Gui, instantly flashed and landed on the deck, kneeling on one knee. Subordinates greet Your Highness the Saint. Rise, 2 elders, I already know the purpose of your trip. You may return and report the situation here to my teacher truthfully. Subordinates obey. The 2, Ju and Gui, answered in unison. At this time, Yin stepped forward quickly and affectionately took Sumo's arm. Sumo, I don't want to go back, I want to stay with you. Don't want to go back either. Bibi Dong also immediately stepped forward and took Sumo's other arm. I want to stay by your side and watch you, lest you find us another sister. Yi Qingshuang also walked up, looking at Sumo with gentle eyes. She didn't speak, but the anticipation in her eyes was self-evident. Sumo nodded slightly. I didn't intend to let you go back. Sea God Island is beneficial for your cultivate, so you all stay. That's great. Hearing this, the 3 women were overjoyed. Let's go, we are boarding the island, Sumo said with a smile, then looked at the Bo Seixi. Zai, help me carry one person. The Bo Seixi nodded. Soon Sumo, with Bibi Dong on his left and Yin on his right, flew in the direction of Sea God Island. The Bo Seixi followed closely behind, carrying Yi Qingshuang. Watching the backs of the departing group, Yu Guan sighed with emotion. Old Gui, I didn't expect Sea God Island to have such a powerful titled Douluo. I couldn't see through her at all. Her strength must be stronger than ours. It is fortunate that Your Highness the Saint took her down, otherwise we might have suffered heavy losses on this trip. Indeed, Guimei said in a deep voice, let's go, it's time to go back and report. Yu Guan nodded slightly and gave the order to everyone. Everyone return immediately. Following Yu Guan's order, the hundreds of ships started again, turned around, and sailed in the direction of Vast Sea City.